It's been 3 months since the accident, and the reality of losing my mom and grandparents still grips me with an unforgiving coldness. I'm left with a vast fortune, an inheritance that feels more like a chain than a gift. Sitting in the living room, the phone call with my dad replays in my mind. His voice, usually so confident, had an edge of desperation this time. "Ava, you need to think about your step-siblings," he had said. I remember my terse reply, "Why should I? They're struggling. After I lost my job, things have been tough. You have enough to share." His words had sparked a fury in me. "Dad, they are not my family. This money is from Mom and Grandpa. They meant it for me, not for your new family." "But Ava, they need this. It could change their lives." His plea made my heart race with anger. "So could have your loyalty to our family, Dad. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine." He tried to argue, but I cut him off. "No, Dad, I've made up my mind." Hanging up, I felt a mix of triumph and guilt. I knew my decision would deepen the rift between us, but the thought of sharing my inheritance with the children of the woman who tore our family apart was unimaginable. My friends have suggested compromise, giving them a small part to ease their burden. But to me, it's not about the money. It's about principle, about the scars left by betrayal. This inheritance is a reminder of everything I lost. A family torn apart, a childhood marred by divorce and deceit. Sharing it would feel like invalidating all that pain, like saying it was all for nothing. As I sit alone, the house feels emptier than ever. This decision might isolate me further, but it's a stand I need to take, for Mom, for Grandpa, and for the family we once were. I brace myself for the fallout. There will be angry calls, harsh words, maybe even legal threats, but I'm ready. This is more than just money. It's about preserving the last vestiges of a family that once was, and a stand against those who shattered it. The following days were a blur of cold silences and heated conversations. My phone became a battleground, with messages and calls flooding in from Dad and his wife. They were relentless, painting me as the villain in a narrative I refused to accept. One evening, as I was trying to focus on a book, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from Dad. With a deep breath, I answered. "Iva, we need to talk about this reasonably." Dad's voice came through, a hint of frustration lacing his words. "There's nothing to discuss, Dad. I've made my decision," I replied, my tone firm. "This isn't just about you, Ava. It's about family, about doing what's right," he countered. "They're not my family." "You made sure of that," I shot back, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. There was a pause, heavy and charged. "I know I made mistakes, but don't let that punish your step-siblings. They've done nothing wrong." I felt a twinge of guilt but pushed it away. "It's not about punishing them. It's about honoring the wishes of Mom and Grandpa. They left this to me, not to them." "Ava, please. Think about it. Just a small portion could—" "No, Dad. I won't be guilted into this. I'm sorry." I hung up before he could reply. The days that followed were a test of my resolve. Dad's wife, whom I never had much of a relationship with, sent me messages pleading for financial help. She painted a grim picture of their life, of struggles and hardships, but her words fell on deaf ears. I couldn't forget how her affair with Dad had shattered our family. My friends were divided on the issue. Some understood my stance, while others suggested I relent to give a small part of the inheritance to ease their burden. "You'll still have more than enough," they reasoned. But every time I thought about relenting, I remembered the cold Christmas dinners, the forced conversations, the way Dad's new family seemed like a replacement for the one he had left behind. No, this was more than just money. It was a stand for what I believed in. As the pressure mounted, I found myself withdrawing, spending more time alone, trying to find peace in the solitude. The mansion, once filled with laughter and love, now echoed with the ghosts of a past I couldn't return to. My decision had set me on a path that I knew would lead to more loneliness. But it was a path I had chosen. The rift with my father and his family was deepening, but I was determined to stay true to my convictions, no matter the cost. The weight of my decision began to press down on me as the days turned into weeks. The coldness from my father's side of the family was expected, but the isolation I felt was more profound than I had anticipated. It wasn't just them. Even among my friends, I sensed a shift. Whispers of being too harsh, too unforgiving, started to reach my ears. One afternoon, as I was trying to immerse myself in my studies, My best friend Emily called. Her voice was gentle, but her words carried a weight. "Ava, are you sure about this? I mean, completely sure?" Emily asked. Her question wasn't just casual curiosity. It was laden with concern. I sighed, feeling the familiar surge of frustration. "Yes, I'm sure. Why does everyone keep questioning my decision?" "Because it's a big one, Ava. And it's not just affecting you. It's affecting your relationship with your dad and his family," she said softly. I frowned, feeling the sting of her words. "They were never really family to me, Em. You know what happened. Why is everyone acting like I'm the one who did something wrong?" "It's not about right or wrong, Ava. It's about what this is doing to you. You're isolating yourself, and it's worrying." Her words were like a mirror, reflecting a truth I had been avoiding. The mansion felt more like a prison than a home, a place filled with the memories of a family that no longer existed. The silence was suffocating, and the loneliness was a constant companion. I changed the subject, not wanting to delve deeper into my feelings. But after the call, her words lingered in my mind. Was I letting my resentment and hurt dictate my actions? Was this stand worth the cost of my peace? The following week, my father's wife reached out again. This time, her message was more desperate, almost begging. "Ava, please reconsider. The kids are struggling. They don't have the same opportunities you had." Her words were a painful reminder of the disparity between our lives, but they also ignited a spark of defiance in me. Why should I be responsible for the consequences of their parents' choices? My mom and grandparents had worked hard for this legacy. It wasn't meant to be a remedy for my father's mistakes. As I lay in bed that night, the mansion around me felt larger and colder than ever. The walls seemed to whisper with echoes of the past, of times when happiness wasn't a distant memory. I realized that this inheritance, this vast wealth, had become a barrier, isolating me from the rest of the world. I was standing at a crossroads, torn between my principles and the growing realization that this battle was consuming me. The question haunted me. Was holding on to this legacy worth the cost of my own happiness and peace of mind? The internal struggle between my principles and the growing isolation became a constant companion in the ensuing days. Each morning, as I woke up in the vast, empty mansion, the weight of my decision and its consequences felt heavier. One particularly gloomy afternoon, I decided to visit Mrs. Jenkins, an old family friend and my mother's confidant. Her quaint cottage, filled with the aroma of freshly baked cookies, was a stark contrast to the cold grandeur of my home. Sitting at her kitchen table sipping tea, I opened up about my turmoil. Mrs. Jenkins listened quietly, her wise eyes reflecting understanding and empathy. "Ava, dear," she finally spoke, "holding on to anger and resentment is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned." Her words struck a chord in me. Was I holding on to this inheritance out of respect for my family's legacy, or was it becoming a tool for my resentment? "But Mrs. Jenkins, it's about principle. My mom and grandparents wouldn't have wanted their hard-earned legacy to go to them," I argued, though a part of me doubted my own words. She nodded. "Principles are important, but so is compassion and peace of mind. Sometimes we must choose battles worth fighting for, and let go of the ones that only bring us pain." Her words lingered with me as I left. The battle I was fighting, was it truly about honoring my family's legacy, or was it a manifestation of the unresolved anger and hurt from my father's betrayal? That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wrestling with a turmoil of emotions. Part of me clung to the idea of legacy and loyalty, while another part yearned for closure and peace. The following days were a period of introspection. I spent hours walking through the gardens, reflecting on my childhood, the happy memories before the divorce, and the painful ones that followed. I remembered my mom's strength, her dignity in the face of betrayal, and her undying love for me. As I sat by the old oak tree where I used to play as a child, a realization dawned on me. This inheritance was not just a sum of wealth, it was a test of my character. Was I going to let it fuel my bitterness? Or was I going to use it to forge a new path, one that would honor the memory of my loved ones in a way that brought peace, not just to me, but perhaps even to those estranged parts of my so-called family? With this new perspective, the decision I had to make began to take a different shape. It was no longer just about money. It was about what kind of person I wanted to be and the legacy I wanted to leave behind. As the days turned into weeks, the weight of my decision and my newfound perspective began to reshape my thoughts. I found myself torn between the desire to uphold my family's legacy and the understanding that clinging to bitterness would only prolong my pain. One evening, while going through old photo albums, I stumbled upon pictures of happier times. Times before the divorce, before everything changed. Seeing my younger self smiling, carefree, surrounded by a loving family, stirred something within me. It was a stark reminder of how much had changed and what I had lost. The phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Dad. I hesitated but answered, my heart pounding in my chest. "Ava, I know we've had our differences, but I need to talk to you about something important." Dad's voice was somber. I listened, a mix of curiosity and apprehension taking hold. "It's about your step-siblings," he began. "They're really struggling. Your stepbrother, he's been working 2 jobs just to save for college. It's taking a toll on him." His words hit a nerve. Despite my feelings towards them, the thought of anyone having to struggle so hard at such a young age was unsettling. "Dad, I don't know what to say," I replied, my voice faltering. "Ava, I'm not asking you to forgive me or forget what happened, but they are innocent in all of this. A little help could go a long way for them," he urged. After we hung up, his words echoed in my mind. I was conflicted. My initial decision was driven by a sense of loyalty to my mom and grandparents. But now, hearing about my stepbrother's struggles, I couldn't help but feel a pang of empathy. The following day, I decided to seek advice from a trusted mentor, my university professor, Dr. Ellis. He had always provided me with wise counsel and a different perspective on things. "Ava, it's commendable that you want to honor your family's legacy," Dr. Ellis said after listening to my story. "But sometimes the best way to honor someone's memory is by spreading kindness and generosity, especially to those who might not expect it from us." His words were a gentle nudge, steering me towards a decision I never thought I'd consider. Was I ready to let go of the past hurts and extend a helping hand to those who were, in a way, a part of my extended family? That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about my mom and grandparents. What would they have done in my place? Would they have held on to the past, or would they have chosen a path of compassion and forgiveness? The decision I was about to make felt like stepping into unknown territory. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about breaking free from the chains of resentment and hurt. It was about choosing a path that could potentially bring healing, not just to me, but also to those whose lives were inadvertently intertwined with mine. The decision to potentially alter the course of my step-siblings' lives weighed heavily on me. However, as I mulled over the conversations with my father, Mrs. Jenkins, and Dr. Ellis, a clarity began to emerge. This was not just about giving away money. It was about breaking a cycle of resentment and animosity that had plagued our families for years. One crisp morning, I made my way to the attorney's office, the custodian of my family's estate. Mr. Thompson, a stern yet kind man in his 60s, greeted me with a knowing look. "Ava, I've been expecting you. Your father has been quite persistent in contacting me about your decision," he said, adjusting his glasses. Sitting across from him, I took a deep breath. "Mr. Thompson, I've decided to set up a trust fund for my step-siblings' education. However, it's important that this is done anonymously. They should not know that the help is coming from me." Mr. Thompson raised his eyebrows, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "That's a very noble decision, Ava. But are you sure? This goes against your earlier stance." I nodded, feeling a sense of peace with my decision. "Yes, I'm sure. This is the right thing to do. It's what my mom and grandparents would have wanted, to help others, but without expecting anything in return." The legal formalities were sorted with precision and discretion. As I left the office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had found a way to honor my family's legacy while also extending an olive branch to a part of my life I had long resented. The news of their sudden financial assistance reached me through a phone call from my dad a few weeks later. He was overjoyed, though clueless about my involvement. His voice, filled with relief and happiness, was something I hadn't heard in a long time. "Ava, you won't believe it. An anonymous donor has set up a trust fund for the kids' education. It's a miracle," he exclaimed. I smiled, a sense of satisfaction filling me. "That's wonderful news, Dad. I'm happy for them," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The decision to help my step-siblings anonymously did more for me than I had anticipated. It allowed me to let go of the bitterness that had clouded my heart and to make peace with a part of my past that I had struggled with. Standing by my decision also meant standing by my values, doing what I felt was right, but on my own terms. It was a testament to the strength and resilience I had inherited from my mother and grandparents. In that moment, I realized that the true legacy they had left me was not just wealth, but the ability to make choices that could bring about positive change, even in the most complex situations. As I moved forward, I found a new sense of purpose and direction. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation and loneliness, began to feel like a home again, filled with possibilities and a future that I was ready to embrace. The months following my decision to help my step-siblings, albeit anonymously, brought a subtle yet profound change in my life. The mansion, which had once echoed with the loneliness of my struggles, started to feel different. It was as if the walls, once witnesses to my family's unraveling, were now basking in the light of a newfound peace. I began to invest more time in my passions and interests. The vast gardens of the estate, which had been meticulously maintained, became my sanctuary. I found solace in tending to the roses my mother loved, feeling closer to her with each bloom that flourished under my care. My focus on academics intensified as well. I enrolled in a master's program, driven by a desire to not just further my education, but to make a meaningful impact in the world. The inheritance, once a burden, now felt like a tool to carve a path that was truly my own. In this newfound tranquility, I also discovered the courage to rebuild bridges. I reached out to my father, initiating conversations that were no longer laced with resentment or bitterness. Our relationship, while still tentative, began to heal. The bitterness that had once defined our interactions gave way to cautious optimism. One brisk autumn day, I invited Dad over for lunch. It was the first time he had been to the mansion since the inheritance was settled. We sat in the dining room, where the air was filled with the aroma of roasted chicken, and the chatter was tentative but genuine. "Ava, I want to apologize for how I handled everything," Dad said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. I looked at him, seeing not just the man who had hurt me, but also the father who was trying to make amends. "I understand, Dad. We both made mistakes. Let's just try to move forward, okay?" He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I'm proud of you, Ava. You've grown into an incredible woman. Your mother would have been so proud." Hearing those words, something inside me healed a little more. It wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about understanding and moving on from the past. As winter approached, the mansion became a hub of activity. I started hosting small gatherings, inviting friends and even some distant relatives. The house, once a symbol of my isolation, became a place of warmth and laughter. In those moments, I realized the true essence of the inheritance I had received. It wasn't just the wealth or the estate. It was the resilience, the compassion, and the strength to make difficult decisions. My family's legacy wasn't just in the tangible assets they left behind. It was in the lessons they taught me, the love they gave me, and the courage they instilled in me to forge my own path. As I stood by the window one evening, looking out at the sprawling grounds blanketed in snow, I felt a deep sense of contentment. I had not only preserved my family's legacy, but had also started writing my own story, one of healing, growth, and hope. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to face it with a heart that was now open to the endless possibilities that life had to offer.
My name is Sandra Holmes. I am 40 years old and I have no kids from my second marriage. My husband is a kind man who never misses our monthly dates. No matter how busy he is, he always keeps his promises. I know I shouldn't compare him to my first husband, but I have never regretted my divorce, nor have I regretted getting remarried. And this month is our 8th wedding anniversary. My husband had reserved a table at a fancy restaurant with a view of the sea. I thought we were going to have a wonderful time. But then I ran into the last person I wanted to see. It was Jim Stone, my ex-husband from 10 years ago. We were about to leave the restaurant after finishing our meal, when my husband excused himself to go to the restroom. I was admiring the ocean view from the window. What a beautiful view! As I gazed at the sea, I reminisced about the times my husband and I had spent looking at the ocean together. Just then, I heard someone call my name. And when I turned around, "Hey, what's so beautiful? Do you think a regular ocean appears nice to someone like you who's pretty much broke?" Jim. "Hey, long time no see. Why are you... Why?" "I'm the one who should be asking you why." Jim sat down in the chair my husband had been using, looking at me as if I was a joke. "Yes, those eyes. I put up with those eyes for a whole decade of our marriage. I never thought I'd run into you here. Can someone like you, who doesn't have much money, really eat at a fancy place like this? Can you even afford it? Or are you here for a once-in-a-lifetime thing? It's our wedding anniversary." "Ah. I see. Poor people can only come to places like this on anniversaries, huh? I come here often, you know." "You're still pathetic. Isn't there someone with you?" "Yeah, there is. I just sent her to pay. You know, handling money is a woman's job." I thought he was still the same, always belittling women. "Ah, she's back. Just wait there." The woman who came back was his lover from 10 years ago. She has aged quite a bit, her beauty half what it used to be, and she looks worn out from life. I guess Jim has been living it up while his wife suffers. "You're still wearing shabby clothes, aren't you? Aren't you embarrassed to dress so poorly? Talking to such a terrible man like him makes me feel sick." I turned my gaze toward the restroom, hoping my husband would return soon, and there he was. He had been watching us for a while, as I was talking to another man. Seeing the confusion on my face, he approached us. "Excuse me, do you need something from my wife?" "Your wife? This woman is your wife?" "Yes." "What do you need? You also look poor." "I guess poor women always remarry poor men. Please don't be rude. My husband is a very respectable man." Jim snorted in disapproval at my response. "Humph. You must be just a useless, broke man." Then he glared at my husband. I thought, this man really hasn't changed at all. Jim was very selfish. Although he worked for a major corporation, it was unclear if he was competent. He was good at sucking up to his boss, though. He blamed his mistakes on his juniors, and loudly claimed their achievements were due to his guidance. How he managed to climb the corporate ladder is beyond me. But by the time we divorced, he had become a manager. Jim claimed he was an elite employee, but I never thought of him as elite. I graduated from a prestigious university. That's what Jim would always brag about. Not just any university, but a very different kind from the ordinary ones. When I was only dating him, I believed his exaggerated stories and thought he was really smart. But when we got married, I discovered that was his only real talent. Plus, he consistently degraded me, even though I only completed high school. Your parents were too poor to send you to university, right? But it's good for you. You didn't have the brains for it anyway. If your family had been rich, you would have had to go to university. But it would have been impossible for someone as stupid as you. My family wasn't poor. I just wanted to start working sooner rather than going to college. Ah, enough with the excuses. You can't handle not making excuses, right? You're an incompetent woman, after all. It's good for women, isn't it? Even if they're incompetent or stupid, as long as they have good looks, they can get by. If they catch a competent man, they can live well. I never imagined he would say such things before we married. So his transformation after marriage shocked me. Moreover, his parents weren't wealthy landowners. His father was just a director. Yet he ruthlessly looked down on anyone he considered poor. You really can't do anything right. You're bad at cooking, you can't clean, and you can't even have kids. Marrying you was a huge mistake. It wasn't a physical issue that prevented me from having kids, it was the stress caused by Jim. My family has always valued frugality and cherishing what we have. But when I cooked with radish leaves to save money, he yelled, "Are you trying to feed me trash?" and threw them in the trash. It made me realize how different we fundamentally were. One day, he told me he had a lover. The woman was much younger than he was. He pushed for a divorce, saying it was better for him to remarry a younger woman. I was happy to divorce such a man. I signed the divorce papers. Who is this man, Sandra? He's my ex-husband, Jim Stone. Oh, I see. Of course, I had told my husband about everything Jim had said and done to me. It had been a painful 10 years, and I had shared it all with tears. Then, without saying anything, my husband just listened and finally said, "Let's be happy from now on." You really dared to marry such a woman like her? Since you're marrying a woman from a poor family, you must be a broke guy too. Well, maybe. Maybe not. Of course, you are. So, you're also a broke man, huh? What? Marrying a poor person means you're broke too, am I right? But, why did you divorce such a wonderful person? Wonderful? Your eyes must be fooling you. Truly wonderful means having a beautiful wife like mine. He indicated his wife as he pointed at her, who stood there looking embarrassed. Is that woman your wife? Yes, she's beautiful, isn't she? She's actually my boss's daughter. Marrying the boss's daughter definitely helps one climb the career ladder faster. Marrying a broke woman like you probably means you're just a regular employee. Too bad. A regular employee? I haven't heard that word in years. What are you trying to prove? Bottom-tier guy marrying a bottom-tier woman. It just means you'll both be broke for the rest of your lives. And you think you deserve to eat in such a fancy restaurant like this? Well, this level of restaurant isn't a problem for us. Yeah, sure, if that's what you think. Just then, a waiter passed by. And my husband pulled out a black card, instructing him to settle the bill. Jim, surprised by the black card, tried not to show it but snorted again. Is that a black card? Showing off a card like that here, you're not used to it. Not used to it? You must have borrowed it from someone. Showing off by flashing the card. But later you'll have to pay back the person who lent you that card, right? I can imagine you're scared to splash the cash in such a place. It's all part of your act. Ha! Funny thing to say. Who would lend their card, I wonder? No matter how naive someone is, they wouldn't lend their card. How would you know that? Jim, you shouldn't say such insulting things. What's insulting? I'm just stating the truth. There's no way you could be wealthy if you married a poor woman like her. My wife is poor, you say? Yes, that's right. Her folks' place is a rundown one-floor home. You know that, right? Or maybe you were too embarrassed to visit her home. So you went to a family restaurant instead? Meeting her parents at a family restaurant for a marriage proposal is unheard of. But for poor people like you, it's probably the norm. Family restaurant, huh? The fact that you thought of that means you must have done your greeting there, right? If you hadn't experienced it yourself, you wouldn't have thought of it. What are you talking about? I'm not short on money. I wouldn't do such a miserable thing. Yet you came up with it. I never would have thought of that. Right, Sandra? What about you? Well, I think I'd like to go to a family restaurant occasionally, but we rarely get the chance. Exactly. What? You're lying. When you were with me, you were happy to go to family restaurants. That's because I had never really been to one before. Oh, I bet. You sure talk big. Coming to such a fancy restaurant just makes you want to act all important. Maybe that's you? It seems like you don't fit in this kind of place. What? You seem out of place, don't you think? There's no way I'm out of place. You're the one who doesn't fit in here. Do you even know who I am? Why would I know you? If you want me to remember you, just become famous. I am well known, though. Well, it's impossible for a regular employee like you to know me, I guess. What? I'm a manager, not a regular employee. Manager? Yes, how about that? Impressive, isn't it? At that moment, the chauffeur arrived, greeted politely, and informed my husband. Sir, your car is ready. Thank you. Huh, what's going on? Oh well, you're probably just the president of some small company. I work for a major corporation, the Holmes Group, and I'm a manager there. Oh, you're still just a manager? Excuse me. You consider yourself top tier. But staying as a manager at your age won't bring any advancement. What, this man works at our company? Yes, he's been with our company for a long time. What do you mean our company? You talk big, but you're just an office lady from a small company. That's right, I don't have kids or any reason to quit my job. But. So, you can't have kids? I was right, you can't have kids. Something's wrong with you. Hey, there's a line to how rude you can be. Sandra is perfectly fine. If she's fine, why can't she get pregnant? Women are supposed to have kids. I don't need to explain that to you. You can't say it because it would prove there's something wrong with her. This man is hopeless. Yes, so bad it's beyond saving. This man's name is Jim Stone. Yes, I understand. He's fired. Sandra, please contact HR. Okay. What? What are you saying? Trying to shock me with that? What company's president are you, thinking you can fool me with such an obvious act? Are you stupid? Jim, my husband is the president of the Holmes Group. What? That can't be. However, the driver, with a look of pity, nodded as he looked at Jim. What, seriously? Is he really our president? Yes, and I am his wife and the vice president of our company. What? That's ridiculous. How could Sandra from a poor family end up as vice president? With just a high school diploma? Such things don't matter. Whether someone graduated from high school or college doesn't determine their worth. That's ridiculous. I will never forgive anyone who insults my wife. No, there's a union, yes, there is a union. The union will protect us employees. You're a manager, right? Managers are not union members. So, you are not protected by the union. Didn't you know that? Seriously. Well, you better brace yourself. Since you insulted my wife, you must face the consequences. Oh no. Jim had a stunned look on his face, but my husband didn't care and asked me if we should go. Then, we left the table. That night, perhaps bothered by the afternoon's events, Jim called. His attitude was completely different from his arrogance earlier. "Sandra, it's been a while." "What do you mean?" "We already had a talk this afternoon, Jim." "Ah, yes. What can I do for you?" "Your dismissal hasn't been issued yet." "Ah, you guys were just joking, right?" "Huh? What do you mean?" "About you being the vice president and your husband being the president." "No, they're all true." "I'm surprised you don't know who your own company's president and vice president are." "Why would you be the vice president, though?" "Because the best way I can help my husband is from the vice president's position." "No. But it's strange. Why would a high school graduate be the vice president?" "It's not strange at all. I only graduated high school because I wanted to start working early. But after we separated, I acquired a college degree." "Huh, really?" "Yes, there are schools you can do from home." "So, you really are the president's wife?" "Yes." "How did you manage to marry the president?" "When did you get married?" "We got married after I divorced you." "I met the president soon after, and we dated for about 2 years before getting married." "Why would the president take an interest in someone like you?" "Stop being so rude." "Oh, sorry. Connections are mysterious, aren't they?" "I just happened to meet the president." "Even so, why would he marry someone broke like you?" "Is he a philanthropist?" "No one marries for charity." "If he's not a philanthropist, did he marry you to make you his slave?" "It's odd otherwise. Maybe today you got lucky to be taken to a fancy restaurant. But usually you must be having plain, poor meals, right? And living a difficult life where you can't even buy what you like, am I right?" "Why would you think that?" "That's not true at all. You're the only one who would do such a thing. There's no way you could marry such a rich man." "Why do you think so?" "Rich people have connections with politicians and other wealthy people. If a poorly raised woman like you shows up at their parties, it would embarrass the president. Or maybe he lets his mistress attend those instead." "You're making wild assumptions. If you keep looking down on me like this, you'll truly regret it. I'm just concerned for you. A woman with a poor upbringing like you marrying a rich man like the president will only suffer. A regular employee's husband would suit you better. Marrying someone richer than me. You must be a foolish woman who can't see ahead." "Who's the fool here?" "If you called just to say that, I'm hanging up." "No, wait. I'm not trying to look down on you. It's just true that you come from poverty that can't be helped. Thinking I'm looking down on you for that is completely wrong. You say I come from a poor family, but my father is wealthy. Your family is poorer than mine." "I didn't say it back then because of your pride. Your family home isn't even half the size of mine. Your father is just a department head, and you're still just a manager." "That's not true. When I proposed to you, you were living in a small single-story house. That was because we were renovating our home then. We had stored all our belongings elsewhere. It was just a temporary residence, no need to move to a big house," my mother said. "That can't be true." "You don't have to believe it, but since the renovation is finished, even if you say you want to visit my parents at home, you've stubbornly refused to go again. I couldn't tell you the truth. Who would visit such a poor, run-down house? You really are hopeless." "Then, I'll send you a picture. This is my family home. You'll see from the picture. The photo I sent was of a large mansion. That's my house. I lived there for a while after our divorce. What? That can't be true. It's true. If this is true, then why were you working as an office lady in a small company? If you're so rich, you wouldn't need to work. And if you did work, wouldn't it be at a large corporation? Indeed, my father is the president of a major company. That company was a new one he started. When it was time to decide who would be the president, it was decided that my brother would take the role. So, I volunteered to handle the administrative work. Now, that company has advanced to the top of the industry. Is that true? Were you really so rich? Yes, this is the truth. This is the real me that you used to look down on. So, that's why you could marry the president? That's not it. I met the president because we shared the same hobbies. We met through our hobbies and hit it off. He didn't know I was the daughter of a wealthy family. And I didn't know he was the president. So, you are at the company where I work because of that? How long have you been at that company? I joined the company right after our divorce. I had a connection by chance. Why? When you were with me, you were a clerk at your brother's company. And after we divorced, you changed jobs? That's right. My brother's company has grown so much. And he told me it was time to do what I love. So I thought I might as well pursue what I've always wanted to do. Then, just as a senior position became vacant, they headhunted me. But at that stage, I still had no acquaintance with the president. He was still someone high above. I don't understand. How can you have connections like that? So, rich people just connect with other rich people? That's why I'm saying those things don't matter. Why do you think like that? It's because of that mindset that you're still just a manager. I wonder why your wife hasn't gotten tired of you yet. She can't get tired of me. I'm supporting her. Keep it up with that attitude, and you'll get what's coming to you. Anyway, that's the situation, so stop belittling me already. I wasn't trying to belittle you. I really thought you were poor. About that dismissal you mentioned this afternoon. Oh, yes, your dismissal. After all the mocking you did, it's only natural you'd be dismissed. That would make me in a tough spot. Can you talk to the president so I don't get fired? What? You were just mocking me tremendously, and yet you ask not to be dismissed? That's impossible, you know. I have nothing but resentment towards you. Why? The fact that you don't think you're resented is truly astonishing. What have I done to you? There's too much to even remember, it's that much. I bet your wife thinks the same as me. Why don't you ask her what she really thinks? Though I doubt she'll tell you. I only said those things because I thought you were poor. Why do you think I'm mocking you when I'm just being honest? Once words are spoken, they can't be taken back, you know? You should understand that as an adult. I do understand that. Then you should understand why you're being dismissed, right? No, I don't understand at all. Please, I'll be in trouble if I'm dismissed. If it were just about this afternoon, the president might have overlooked it. But then you had to call and ask why this and why that. My husband is here now, frowning. He really thinks you're hopeless. Maybe you should just give up, there's no saving you. No. If the president is right there, why can't you just say so? It's only natural for a husband and wife to be together. Besides, you didn't ask if someone was with me, did you? That's true, but you've poured gasoline on your own fire. You mocked not just me, but my parents and my husband too. Look, I didn't think you'd get this angry. Please forgive me. If I had known you were a wealthy lady, I wouldn't have said such mocking things. I won't say them again, please forgive me. Just give up. I think your dismissal order will come down tomorrow. Wait, please. Jim's voice echoed on the other end of the phone, but I hung up and looked at my husband. The next day, Jim came to the president's office. His face was all white, with dark circles under his eyes. And he seemed to be in a really bad condition. I was in a meeting with my husband, the president, about business matters. But I was startled by Jim's appearance. Jim, what's wrong? I'm very sorry. Jim apologized as he sat down on the spot. Jim, what are you doing? Please, just don't fire me. What do you mean? Of course, the president knew about yesterday's conversation. He had guessed from my responses during the call. And I had detailed Jim's remarks after hanging up. Therefore, his impression of Jim was very poor, and his anger was greater than mine. I am truly sorry again. I didn't know your wife was from a wealthy family. I think she is a perfect match for the president's wife. I also heard she graduated from university, even if it was through correspondence. She's a hard worker, a far cry from my own wife. So you decided on her as your wife, and then you got rid of her, right? What? Jim looked up at the president, wondering how he knew such a thing. Of course, I've told my husband everything. We're married, after all. Or do you and your wife not talk about your pasts? No, it's not like that, but that was a long time ago. I was young then. I thought Sandra was just a poor man's daughter. So I thought it was okay to have a mistress. How does it come to that? Is that why you think it's okay to commit sexual harassment or power harassment? What do you mean? Don't tell me you haven't done it? There are complaints from your female coworkers. They say if our company doesn't handle it, they'll go to the police. Our company was just discussing what to do about it. When your disrespectful remarks came yesterday. It's really hopeless, isn't it? That's right. I wouldn't have thought you were actually harassing or bullying. But watching you yesterday, it seemed all too true. You don't even regard women as people, do you? You think they're below you. No, I never, even if that were true, firing me would be too harsh. Please, show some mercy. Well, indeed, you have a family. If you were fired, you wouldn't be the only one in trouble. That's right. Exactly. My husband smirked and looked at me. So, what do you think, Sandra? How about sending Jim to our Ohio branch? Wait, what? The Ohio branch is in a region with very few people, practically unsustainable as a company. The former president, who came from that town, established the branch there to help the local people. But it's a lonely place with just one employee. The previous employee reportedly went mad from the loneliness. We want you to turn that branch around in 3 years. If you can do that, we'll bring you back here. Of course, if you can't, you'll spend your retirement in Ohio. Thank you. I appreciate it. Under the guise of the president's mercy, Jim set off for the Ohio branch. But both myself and my husband knew it was an impossible task. Having to work tirelessly alone for the small number of town residents. It was obvious that there wouldn't be any profit to be made. Unaware of this, Jim moved to the branch all motivated. His transfer was with his mistress who had been his wife. But surely she wouldn't be satisfied with just the cold and nothing else there. And eventually, she reached her limit. His salary plummeted, and despite being the branch manager in name, his pay was minimal, leading his wife to start yelling. This resulted in daily arguments. And although he boasted that if he turned things around in 3 years, he could return to the head office, his city-bred wife couldn't believe his words. She left the divorce papers and went back to the city. Jim tried his best for a year, but no matter how hard he worked, the population wouldn't increase and no profits would come. Eventually, he realized that no amount of effort here would change anything, and one day submitted his resignation. After leaving the company on his own terms, Jim contacted his wife, but by then, she had found someone new. Jim was not only ignored by her but was beaten up by her new man, and ended up in the hospital. After being discharged, Jim looked for a job, but at his age, he found nothing. And life became harder for him. He lived in a shabby, run-down apartment, and the only job he could find was as a nighttime store clerk. The man who had once boasted of graduating from a prestigious university now stood alone in a store at night. As for me, I continued to be protected by my kind husband, enjoying another wonderful date this month. Marrying him changed my life so much. I'm grateful that Jim and I divorced.
Patty, I've always been telling you, haven't I? I wanted a son to carry on our family name, yet you gave birth to a girl. I don't need someone who's useless like you. Sign the divorce papers and get out of the house with your daughter.
One day, out of the blue, this was what Tony blurted out at my in-laws' house. In his right hand was the divorce paper, and he was holding his mistress on his left side. As I was dumbfounded by his unbelievable claim, his mistress added seriously, "Hello, I'm Kristen. I'm carrying Tony's baby, and of course, the baby's a boy. We've already confirmed the gender with tests, so I'll be the one to make Tony happy. Please, don't interfere with us anymore. Got it?" It was as if I was being painted as the villain. Then my mother-in-law, Laura, delivered the final blow. "I was completely deceived by you, Patty. I feel sorry for Tony, so never show your face to us again." There was not a single reasonable person around here. I couldn't understand how they could say such heartless words like that. While glancing at the entrance, I was utterly shocked, but I wasn't surprised or panicked about the situation. "What are you all even talking about? I have been single for a week now. I'm no longer your wife, Tony, so do as you please. Sarah and I will leave."
Patty, have you lost your mind? When did we get divorced? The divorce is supposed to happen right now.
You're the one who lost your mind, Dad. We've already moved to a new house, so bye.
What are you talking about, Sarah? You guys are really stupid.
My husband laughed loudly enough for it to be heard outside as he pointed at us. He may be laughing now, but that won't last long. He has no clue on what's about to happen. I will never forgive my husband. He will surely regret hurting our daughter. As my husband continued to laugh, I calmly began to speak. The stupid one here is you, Tony. I already filed the divorce papers. You just had no clue about it.
Being pushed to the edge really does make people do unexpected things, huh? I never thought you would espouse such nonsense, but I guess this is your true nature. I feel way better knowing I'm divorcing a liar like you.
My husband, along with Laura and Kristen, looked down on me with contempt. Really, why did I ever approve of such a foolish daughter-in-law like you? I really want to punch my past self. I wasted my precious son's time. The biggest sin of my life. The only comfort is that you're about to be discarded right now. So just get out, loser. Oh, Laura, you and Tony are too kind. How could you just listen to her? I definitely made the right choice in choosing Tony. He's such a compassionate man. Patty, stop lying and let Tony go. It's for your own good.
Their smirks were exactly like those evil witches in fairy tales. The heart is revealed through actions, and the ability to upset people with just a laugh is, in a way, a talent. But where there is evil, there is also justice. From now on, I will be the one to judge this evil. They will all regret what they've done. I displayed a video on my smartphone and confronted the three. Do you recognize this?
Ah, a video. No. Footage from a camera? What about it?
Oh, isn't this Tony's room? Why do you have footage of Tony's room on your smartphone? Do they really not understand anything? For people who call others stupid, their brains don't seem to be very sharp. That's exactly why they engage in immoral acts like infidelity so easily and even condone it. At the moment, it all made sense to me. I decided to reveal the truth to the three of them. This is footage from a hidden camera. I have been secretly monitoring you, Tony. I installed a camera in your room. So with that, I found out about your mistress and the pre-filled divorce papers.
What? You installed a hidden camera in my room?
That's why I secretly took out the divorce papers while you were away and submitted them. If you think I'm lying, why don't you go check it? There's nothing left in that drawer. Tony returned from his room half in disbelief, but when he came back, his face was pale. He seemed to have recognized the truth of my words. Laura and Kristen also lost their smiles when they saw his state. I can't believe it. She already knew.
Well, I'm surprised, but this is convenient, isn't it? It saved me the trouble of submitting them. Kristen, let's remarry right now. Nothing can stop us now.
That's right. When you think about it, there's nothing bad about this. It just sped up the process of getting rid of a useless daughter-in-law like her. This woman couldn't get pregnant with a son anyway. She was never right for my precious Tony. This is a chance for Tony to restart his life. Laura laughed loudly. As a mother myself, I understand the feelings of a parent who loves their child, but even then, the love she has for her son seems a bit too much. Certainly, my husband had taken over the family business after his father passed away, and he probably earned more than the average person. I knew he had worked hard. After all, we were married. But no matter how adorable a parent finds their outstanding child, it doesn't justify mistreating their spouse. The harsh words thrown at me by Laura from the time we were married are a bitter memory I wish I could forget. It has been truly difficult. My only ally is my daughter, Sarah. She has even been ignored and mistreated by them. I can never forgive them. Only I can protect my daughter. I will make them pay for how they treated us. I pulled out a small piece of paper from the drawer and presented it to the three. Tony and his mother looked at the paper with puzzled expressions.
What is this scrap of paper? A business card?
Hansen Corporation's CEO, Robert Gale? Isn't Hansen Corporation a major client of your company, Tony?
Yeah. Why do you have the business card of the CEO of such a big company? You shouldn't have any chance to interact with a CEO like him.
The two of them spoke as they pleased. Do they think I'm some kind of punching bag? Unfortunately, I'm human and sharp words do hurt. But they seem unaware of this. While that was happening, Kristen looked pale. Noticing her turning pale, Tony spoke up.
Kristen, what's wrong? You look pale.
Of course she would. Wouldn't you be shocked if someone suddenly pulled out your own father's business card?
Huh? Father? What are you talking about?
Seeing my husband's visibly confused expression, I couldn't help but smile. He really knew nothing. Seizing the moment, I raised my voice and stated clearly, Your mistress is the daughter of your client's CEO.
What? No way. Such a perfect coincidence like that can't be true. You must have gone crazy.
I always thought you were a worthless daughter-in-law, but now you're just a jerk trying to frame people. I wonder what kind of upbringing produces such a worthless person like you. I'd really like to ask your parents about this. I was infuriated by what Laura said, which not only insulted me, but my parents as well. She really insults people as easily as breathing. My daughter puffed up her cheeks in indignation as well. Seeing her like that relaxed me a bit. Emboldened by the comments of Tony and his mother, Kristen confronted me with a defiant expression.
I agree with Tony and Laura. I don't care if he's the CEO of a big company or whatever. I've never met or heard of such a person. Don't make up someone's family out of nowhere, you jerk.
Exactly. I have met Mr. Gale because of my position, but he looked nothing like Kristen. Though I admit judging Kristen as a CEO's daughter makes sense, since she is elegant and intelligent. She's totally on a different level than you.
Right. She must have been raised by wonderful parents, unlike you. That also means Sarah's future is predictable, even though she's Tony's daughter with a mother like you.
Laura glaringly sent a contemptuous look towards my daughter. Not to be outdone, my daughter glared back fiercely. Enraged, I slammed the papers I had prepared hard onto the table.
What now? Robert Gale? Christian Gale? Adopted?
This is Mr. Gale's family registry. It proves the identities of Mr. Gale, his wife, and their unmarried child. As written here, Kristen is Mr. Gale's adopted daughter, which is why she doesn't resemble him.
What? Why do you have Mr. Gale's family registry?
Because Mr. Gale and I have a cooperative relationship. After I learned of your affair, I tried to reach out to him. Mr. Gale kindly entrusted me with this family registry. Tony then raised his voice.
What a joke. He's the CEO of a big company. You can't just meet him that easily. That family registry must be fake.
Now you've even resorted to faking documents. What a hopeless woman. Did you think we were so dumb as to be deceived by fake documents like this? You're gravely mistaken. Don't lump us in with someone as dumb as you.
The stupid ones here are you guys. Faking official documents is a crime called forgery of official documents, punishable by 1 to 10 years in prison. I wouldn't commit such a crime just for this. If I got arrested, Sarah would suffer.
Then why are these documents here? You must have prepared these to confuse us.
He seemed desperate to deny any relationship between Mr. Gale and Kristen. Clearly, the idea of his mistress being the daughter of a client's CEO was unthinkable. People tend to shut out information that's inconvenient to them. But that's fine. Whether they face it or not, they're doomed for life. If you think they're fake, that's fine. I'm just letting you know the facts. My firm stance began to change my husband and Laura's attitude. Their smiles vanished and they began to tremble. Tony turned back to Kristen.
Kristen, just to make sure, tell me. You weren't deceiving me, right?
Kristen shook her head vigorously.
That's impossible. Why would I lie to the person I love? Mr. Gale is a stranger to me. I had a child with you because I love you. I would never lie about this.
I couldn't help but give a grand round of applause to Kristen's response. Well done, Kristen. You've shown your unwavering will. You truly love Tony, don't you? I'm moved. So I have a reward for you. Just wait a moment. I hurried out of the living room with puzzled looks stabbing my back. Giving no care to that, I stepped outside and quickly returned with the reward. Sorry for the wait. Here's your reward.
What? No way!
Kristen's eyes widened in shock as she backed away. Unbeknownst to her, Mr. Gale had been waiting outside all along. Furthermore, the door was intentionally left ajar. When Tony presented me with the divorce papers today, I glanced at the entrance with dismay, aware of Mr. Gale's presence. Tony straightened up immediately and greeted as soon as he saw Mr. Gale.
Oh, Mr. Gale, it's been a while. Don't worry about formalities. They mean nothing to me.
Mr. Gale returned Tony's greeting with a cold gaze. A deep wrinkle formed between his eyebrows and his veins popped out.
I've been waiting outside the door, and oh, what an interesting conversation I've heard. Tony, I've come to understand your true nature very well. It's been an enlightening experience. To think that there are people who speak such foul words in this world. Don't you think so? Well, you see...
Knowing that Mr. Gale had heard everything, Tony seemed unable to come up with any excuses. He just stood there, dripping with cold sweat and looking down. Mr. Gale also glanced at Kristen, whose shoulders jolted up.
Don't you two feel ashamed of what you've done? There are things one shouldn't do as a human. Marriage and love are different. Once you've sworn eternal love, you must at least fulfill the basic responsibilities. Apologize to Patty immediately.
His angry voice filled the room. Tony and Kristen shrank back, but Laura stood her ground defiantly.
If eternal love is so important, then Tony and Kristen are deeply in love too. Patty no longer loves Tony. After all, she was the one who filed for divorce. Therefore, it is only natural for two people in love to be together. There is nothing wrong with that.
That is an unbearable justification. Yes, it is joyful when two people in love come together. However, both parties being single is the basic condition. Moreover, there's not only Patty, but also Sarah involved. Disposing of someone because they can't have a son? What era do you think you're living in? If you are living in the present, please update your mindset. This is just unacceptable.
At Mr. Gale's anger, Laura ran out of words to respond. The room fell silent. There was a reason for his anger. In fact, Mr. Gale's wife was infertile and unable to have children. There are still people with outdated mindsets like Tony and Laura, but there are also many who want to have children but can't. Pregnancy and childbirth are sacred, and we mustn't forget that. Mr. Gale could not tolerate his family hurting others for selfish reasons like wanting a son for heir. Tony and Laura were silenced by Mr. Gale, but Kristen's eyes burned with anger. She started to argue back to Mr. Gale directly.
You preach as if you're some kind of saint, but you're selfish too. You adopted me because you couldn't have your own kids, right? Whether it was good for me didn't matter. That was just adults making decisions for their own convenience.
Kristen clenched her fists and yelled with all her might. I don't know the details, but Mr. Gale is a strict man who apparently didn't spoil Kristen with money or material things. This may be why Kristen feels unloved by her father, as they aren't blood related. Tony and Laura seemed confused as the divorce turmoil had suddenly turned into an argument between Mr. Gale and Kristen. They looked at each other uneasily. Kristen, unable to control her emotions, continued to lash out at Mr. Gale.
You just adopted me for Mom's sake, right? Because she wanted a child? Because she was important to you? I was only being used to satisfy someone else. I'm just a tool to you. Everyone thinks they can just use me.
Although I haven't known Mr. Gale long, he seems like a genuinely good person. Even as an outsider, I think Kristen is wrong, but Mr. Gale quietly listened to her.
What? Aren't you going to say anything? Or do you think what I'm saying isn't even worth responding to?
That's not it. It's not that. I'm actually happy.
Happy? Are you crazy? Or is that some kind of weird hobby?
It's the first time you've spoken honestly to me. You've always been a well-behaved child who didn't need much attention. I used to think you were just a quiet kid, but now I see that's not the case. You must have endured a lot on your own.
His eyes softened as he spoke. Kristen's shoulders trembled slightly.
Yes, I have been strict with you, that's true. I won't make excuses. But it was because I love you. They say the opposite of love is indifference, right? I wouldn't bother saying anything if I didn't care.
Stop it! I can't believe you're saying this now. I've never been loved by my family.
Enough, Kristen. You don't understand anything. Even as an outsider, I can see that Mr. Gale cares about you. Yet you just deny it one-sidedly. Right now, you just look like a child throwing a tantrum. I couldn't help but intervene. As a parent myself, I couldn't stand to listen any longer. Being a parent is harder than most can imagine. You can't just quit midway. There's no guarantee of a return for all the effort you pour into your children. Sometimes what you do for their sake can backfire. Even after lovingly raising them, in the end, you have to let go. It's a tough job, isn't it? But the reason parents can keep going is solely the love and responsibility they feel for their children. It's clear that Mr. Gale has more than enough of both, but Kristen seems too stubborn to see the truth right now.
Don't lecture me when you were just dumped by your husband. You're just clinging to him because you can't do anything else. Everything has been taken away from you, and you're just going to keep falling into misery.
The conversation shifted towards me, and seeing that it was their chance, Tony and Laura regained their momentum.
That's right. I don't know much about Kristen's past, but what's certain is that she'll be happy from now on because she's remarrying me.
Yes, Tony is a wonderful man. He was too good for someone like you. Now he can finally start a life with a woman who matches him. I'm looking forward to it. A child's happiness is a parent's happiness.
What they were saying wasn't wrong, but coming from Laura, it sounded insincere. My daughter seemed to think the same, given her grandmother a cold look. Despite the three showing no signs of remorse, I boldly declared to them, I don't mind. Remarry or do whatever you like, but remember, you'll be the ones regretting it. That's for certain. My husband and his mother swallowed nervously, but still arrogantly took Kristen's hand.
You're complaining it's so lame. Just keep on talking, loser.
Don't bother contacting us anymore. We four, including Tony and Kristen's baby, will live happily together. Goodbye, Dad. I don't think we'll see each other again. Don't expect to see your grandson.
With those final words, the three left the house. After the storm had passed, a silence remained. Mr. Gale was the first to speak.
Patty, Sarah, I'm truly sorry for the rude things my daughter has said.
Please don't apologize. This isn't your fault, Mr. Gale, and it's okay.
What do you mean by it's okay?
Mr. Gale looked puzzled, but I gave him a meaningful smile. There are facts that none of you know yet. They should come to light soon enough. At my words, both Mr. Gale and Sarah could only tilt their heads in confusion. A few days later, I was waiting for a call from my husband at a certain place. It's one of the most luxurious apartments in LA. I quite like the view. It's outstanding. Even if the wait gets long, I doubt I'll get bored. While I was drinking my second cup of coffee, the long-awaited call finally came. I answered with an exceptionally cheerful voice, and then heard my husband's very flustered voice. What's the matter? Calling all of a sudden like this? It's only been a few days since you cut ties with me.
Help me, Patty. Kristen has gone missing.
Oh, really? That sounds serious. But if that's the case, shouldn't you report it to the police? I'm not in the business of finding people, you know.
No, Patty, it's not just that she's gone missing. My ATM cards and credit cards have disappeared too. She had asked me about the pins before, saying we should share important information in case of emergencies. And now my money is being withdrawn like crazy. I don't know what to do.
My husband's words were all over the place, and I just had to laugh. Meanwhile, he continued to rant about something dumb. He seemed utterly clueless and confused. After a good laugh, I finally decided to tell him the truth. You know, Kristen has another man, not just you. She actually has a real boyfriend.
What are you talking about all of a sudden? I'm already so upset. Don't confuse me more.
It's true, and if you want to know, the baby in Kristen's belly isn't yours either.
That's a lie. It has to be. You just have a bad personality, giving me wrong information and looking down, laughing at me like that. You're the worst. I've lost all respect for you.
My husband was so upset he started crying. So I guess Tony and Kristen's romance didn't last long. Is his mother worried? Of course, for me, everything's going according to plan. I'll show you proof that what I'm saying is true. Here's a question for you. Where am I right now?
How should I know? Just go to hell.
Wow, that hurt. But the one who's really going to hell isn't me, it's you. Anyway, the correct answer is right here. I switched to a video call to show my surroundings. Immediately, I could hear my husband scream from the smartphone.
Kristen, why are you with Patty? You two were conspiring against me?
Kristen remained silent, looking down. That's understandable. After all, I now have leverage of her. Tony's not just Kristen here. Let me introduce you to Alex, Kristen's real boyfriend. As I introduced him,
Alex appeared on the screen. Yes, I had already made contact with Kristen's actual boyfriend. We had just stormed into Kristen's house together. A louder scream came from the other end.
You bastard. How dare you seduce my Kristen? You have my ATM cards and credit cards, don't you? Give them back now, along with the money you stole. I must say, I didn't know anything about this. Not about your existence, nor the ATM cards or credit cards. I like an explanation about this situation too. Kristen?
Alex glared sharply at Kristen as she kept on looking down.
Kristen? What is going on? Who is this man? Your real boyfriend? That's a lie, right? We loved each other so much. Tell me the truth.
Shut up!
What? I can't hear you.
I said shut up! You delusional jerk! What do you mean we loved each other? I never loved you, not even once. It was all in your head. I was only with you for the money, and you easily cheated on me when you had a wife, you jerk.
My husband was so shocked he could hardly close his mouth. After a long silence, he suddenly slumped over the table and started crying. He continued to cry out like a child, unable to have a proper conversation. Meanwhile, Alex was grilling Kristen, and she fired back in a hostile way, making things worse. I felt the urge to go home and relax over coffee with Sarah, but I couldn't just abandon the job halfway. Since there was no more need for me to say, I quietly left my seat and moved to the hallway. All that was left was to patiently wait for my husband to recover. After he had cried enough, Tony finally raised his swollen face. Just when I thought we could wrap things up, he made a surprising suggestion.
Let's start over, Patty. We can still go back to how we were.
What? What are you talking about?
Taking care of Sarah alone must be financially difficult for you, right? Besides, isn't it better for the family to be together? Mom will surely understand.
How conveniently he speaks of family now. A word that should be warm and loving has turned vile because of him. I laughed at him with all the scorn I could muster. No, I'll pass. Do you have any idea how much you've made me suffer? And it's not just about me. What angers me most is that you hurt Sarah. I never thought you would neglect your own daughter after an affair.
I just really wanted a son. There was no other intention, and it's not too late. If we love each other again, a son will come soon.
Please stop saying such disgusting things. There's not an ounce of love left for you and me. I can't even stand to breathe the same air as you, let alone touch you. And you keep talking about a son. But isn't that completely unnecessary now?
What do you mean?
Your misconduct is already well known among our company and business partners. It's being viewed as a problem everywhere, so it's only a matter of time before our existing deals are canceled. Soon you'll struggle with cash flow and the business will become unmanageable. If the company falls apart, what's the use of an heir? After that, my husband was silent and seemed stunned. I finished with all the sarcasm I could muster. The only family you have left is your mother. Make sure to get along with her. I pressed the end call button and left Kristen's house. That was the last time I saw my husband. The clear blue sky seemed even more beautiful today. After that, my husband was shunned by everyone from his company and business partners. As expected, the company faced financial difficulties and quickly decided to fold. Tony and Laura's once strong bond took a hit when they started struggling with money, and now they're stuck in a cycle of arguing. The industry spread rumors about my husband, and he has no prospects for re-employment. Laura has never worked a part-time job, so she can hardly start working now, and does nothing but complain at home. My husband manages to get by on day labor, but his standard of living continues to decline. Both he and his relationship with his mother got worse, and it seems they will lead a difficult life forever. For those who saw their child as a mere tool, this was a fitting end. Meanwhile, Kristen did give birth safely, but eventually broke up with Alex, her real boyfriend. Perhaps Alex was a decent man. If suddenly you find out your girlfriend was cheating and stole from another, it's normal to want to avoid getting involved in that mess.
While he's someone I don't really know, I do hope he finds happiness. After breaking up with Alex, Kristen, who has never worked properly, has no choice but to rely on her father, Robert. But being a strict man, both to himself and others, Robert did not coddle her, but rather pushed her away. Of course, this isn't to say he abandoned her. Robert loves Kristen, which is why he wants her to acknowledge her mistakes, reflect, and live an honest life. I am indebted to Robert as well. I can only hope that some of his wishes reach her. As for me, I now live peacefully with my daughter. While we aren't rich, living without fear of living with toxic family members is truly comfortable. I want to give my daughter all the attention she missed out on. Years later, I was lucky enough to get remarried with my current husband and was blessed with a son. Looking at our son, I am reminded that there are people who can't have kids, despite their desires, and that pregnancy and childbirth are sacred things. These are things I must never forget. Going forward, I would cherish the miracle of my children's birth and vow to find happiness with my new family.
Oh? Is that you, Mandy? The moment I heard that voice, memories of my hellish married life surged back. And I turned around with goosebumps. Standing there was my smirking ex-husband, with a young woman clinging to his arm. The very person who made my first marriage a living hell is now standing right in front of me. Who would have thought we'd meet here? It's been a while, hasn't it? Huh? The ex-wife? Nice to meet you. The young woman next to him greeted me in a high-pitched voice. My ex-husband had his arm around her. You see, this is my current wife. Young and cute, huh? You are nothing compared to her. As I tried to leave, he stopped me and looked me over. Look at you, an old, unemployed, and poor single woman. You're living a miserable life because you couldn't serve me properly. Serves you right. Hey, that's a bit much. But it's true though. I was seething inside. I had to say something. Turning back to them, I asked quietly. Hey, who exactly are you talking about? My name is Mandy Thompson. I've been married to Ben for 2 years. In fact, I was married once before I met my current husband. That marriage was so tragic that I don't even want to remember it. The man I first married was named Steve Owen. We met at a small company where I started working as a fresh graduate. Steve, who was in charge of training me, seemed manly and dependable. Having had little experience in love, I was thrilled when he asked me out. And I quickly agreed to date him. However, Steve had always been somewhat tyrannical. He would get moody when I talked to other male employees, or would behave arrogantly towards restaurant staff. But love was blind. After 2 years of dating, he proposed, and I agreed to marry him. Steve strongly wished that I become a housewife, so I did just that upon our marriage. Once married, I realized that his manly character was just domineering. Now that you're a housewife, do the household chores perfectly. That's your job. He never helped with the housework. No matter how hard I tried, he never appreciated my efforts. Instead, he was always nitpicking how I managed the household chores and finances. Still, I kept doing my best, grateful to be allowed to stay home. 3 months into our marriage, during winter, I came down with a severe cold. Feeling ill since morning, I checked my temperature, over 100 degrees. Chills and dizziness made it impossible to do any housework. When Steve returned from work and saw me wrapped in a blanket, he visibly grimaced. Hi, Mandy. What are you doing lying down? Steve. I think I caught a cold. My temperature is over 100 degrees. Despite my explanation, he frantically looked around the house and scowled. Hey. You haven't done the cleaning or the laundry. I've been feeling ill since the morning, I really couldn't do it. don't spout such lazy excuses, you're just a housewife," he shouted and then yanked away my blanket. "You haven't even prepared my dinner. Make it now." "But I told you, I have a high fever. I can't possibly cook." Tears filled my eyes as I pleaded. But Steve didn't care and forced me to get up, then shoved a $10 bill at me. "Then, go buy something with this now." "What?" "Don't buy anything for yourself. You skipped dinner as a punishment for slacking off. Just buy mine, now." Steve dragged me to the entrance while I was staggering and then threw me out of the house. In the freezing cold, in my pajamas outside. It seemed I wouldn't be let back in until I brought something back. After managing to buy groceries, I collapsed right at the entrance upon returning. Steve glanced at me briefly, snatched the ready-made food by his side, and began eating silently while watching TV. As I lay collapsed in the cold entrance, I heard Steve's laughter from afar, and a tear rolled down my cheek. Yet, I hadn't considered divorce because I didn't want to betray my father, who had been delighted by my marriage. My mother passed away from illness when I was in middle school, and since then, it had always been just my father and me. My father was running a stationery shop and we weren't wealthy. But I had a happy life with my kind father who loved me deeply. When I got married, he said with tears, "Now I can finally rest easy. Be happy." If I divorced within just 6 months of marriage, it would betray my kind father. I thought I just needed to endure it for myself. Steve's domineering behavior continued. I managed to endure it, exhausting myself through the days of our marriage. About a year into our marriage, bad news arrived. My father was hospitalized with advanced cancer. Dad. I had no idea things had gotten this bad. My father had lost a lot of weight during the short time I hadn't seen him.
Yeah.
I realized too late. They say there's nothing they can do now. As he spoke quietly, I cried. My father gently wiped away my tears and asked, "Mandy, are you happy in your marriage?" I lied instinctively. I didn't want to make him worried about me on his sickbed.
Yeah.
"I'm happy. Steve has been very good to me." "Is that so?" "Well, that's good then." Looking back, maybe my father sensed something then. However, he said nothing more. With the added need to care for my father, life became even harder. Until then, I had spent all my time during the day managing the detailed housework that Steve demanded. But with the nursing of my father, that became difficult. Amidst this life, I asked Steve, "Steve, I have a favor to ask. Could you please visit my father in the hospital?" "Huh? Why should I?" Steve grimaced as he looked at me. "Well, you are his son-in-law after all. I'm sure my father would be happy to see your face." "What are you talking about?" "I don't want to see the face of a dying old man." I stared at Steve in disbelief as he continued, oblivious to my shock. "More importantly, don't slack on the housework because you're nursing the old man. Think well about what to prioritize." With that, he left grumpily for the bathroom. Later, as my father's condition worsened and I spent more time in the hospital, Steve, far from supporting me, berated me daily for not doing the housework. On the day of my father's surgery, when I told him I would be away all day, Steve exploded. "Hey, don't mess around. What do you think a wife's job is?" "But it's my father's surgery day." "So? What about my meal? The cleaning? The laundry? Can't you manage for one day?" As I mustered the courage to say this, Steve sighed dramatically and pulled something out of his bag. It was a signed divorce form. A divorce form. Yes, that's right. I'm supporting you, but if you can't even manage the housework, it's a divorce. But it's about my father. I'm the only family he has. I don't care. If you're saying you won't do the housework because you're accompanying him to surgery, then it's an immediate divorce. Just think well. Steve left these words behind and went off to work. I was stunned, staring at the divorce form on the table. But I had no choice but to accompany my father to surgery. After the surgery, as my father woke up, I was crying by his bedside. "Dad, are you awake?" As I hurriedly wiped my tears, my father spoke quietly to me. "You're really struggling with your married life, aren't you?" "It's okay, I kind of knew." "Dad. I'm sorry. I might get a divorce. Even though you were so happy about my marriage, I'm really sorry." I sobbed like a little child and told him everything. My father listened, nodding, and then he said, "Mandy, there's something I've never told you before." Actually, I was stunned by the shocking content of his words. When I returned home, Steve was waiting, looking furious. "Hey. You skipped housework to go to the hospital, didn't you?" "Yes." "Then it's a divorce. Hurry up and sign the divorce form." Steve forced me to sit at the dining table and to write the divorce form. I quietly asked him, "Are you really going to abandon me? Me, who is stressed out from taking care of my father?" "Yes, that's right. I don't care if the old man dies and you're left all alone. I'll gladly get rid of a defective wife like you." I silently signed the divorce form and left the house on that day. As I stood at the entrance with my belongings, Steve said dismissively, "Goodbye. Never show your face here again, damn wife." Soon after, I returned to my family home to continue caring for my father. However, 3 months later, my father passed away. After the funeral, when things had settled down a bit, a lawyer came to visit me. "I've come regarding your father's estate." I remembered what my father had said on the day of the surgery. "Mandy, I've been hiding this. But I've been trading stocks and cryptocurrencies for about 10 years. "What? Dad, why are you bringing this up now?" "With that, there's a substantial amount of money. When I pass away, it will all be yours. So don't worry about living after the divorce. Go ahead and leave him and live your life." "Dad, all I want is for you to be happy. Please, don't make the wrong choice." Knowing this allowed me to decide to get a divorce. However, when I heard the amount of the inheritance from the lawyer, I was floored. Excluding taxes, I would have $3 million left. There were also several properties. My father, who had run a small stationery shop, had a talent for making money. I followed the lawyer's instructions and gratefully accepted the inheritance from my father. Later, when I had trouble with property management, I met my current husband, Ben. Born into a family of landlords, he easily solved my problems. Later, Ben proposed a relationship with marriage in mind, and I decided to remarry. Attracted by his competence and kind nature, I now have a happy life. I hope to continue living a peaceful life with the person I love. But just when I thought that, I ended up having a nightmare reunion at a real estate office I was visiting for business. I encountered my ex-husband, Steve. "Oh? Is that you, Mandy?" The moment I heard that voice, memories of my hellish married life surged back. And I turned around with goosebumps. Standing there was my smirking ex-husband, Steve, with a young woman clinging to his arm. Who would have thought we'd meet here? It's been a while, hasn't it? Huh? Steve's ex-wife? Nice to meet you. The young woman next to him greeted me in a high-pitched voice. My ex-husband had his arm around her. You see, this is my current wife, Kelly. Young and cute, huh? You are nothing compared to her. Faced with such an introduction by Steve, I informed him emotionlessly. I have some errands to run, so I will be leaving soon. Hey, is that your attitude after running into your ex-husband by chance? Can't you at least make small talk? As I remained silent, Steve looked me over from head to toe. You're all dressed up, but what are you doing at a real estate agency? You must be looking for some rundown apartment to live in alone, huh? That's none of your business. Then Kelly noticed the bag I was carrying. Huh? This person is carrying a super expensive bag? Steve, didn't you say your ex-wife is unemployed? Silly Kelly, it must be a fake. It's just a poor person's pretense. Is that so? Oh my, how shameful. Kelly laughed joyfully, and Steve smiled at her. Seeing in disgust their faces, he turned back to me and said disdainfully. What? Are you jealous? A poor, unemployed single woman at your age. You're living a miserable life because you couldn't serve me properly. Serves you right. Hey, Steve, that's too much. But well, it's true. I was furious inside. I had to say something. Turning back to them, I asked quietly. Hey, you, who exactly are you talking about? Huh? Just then, an executive from the real estate company approached me. Ms. Thompson, I apologize for the wait. I understand you wanted to discuss the matter regarding the condo you own. I responded politely to the executive. Yes, thank you for your assistance. But before we talk, may I have a moment? I ran into an acquaintance. Of course. I'll be waiting. Steve and Kelly watched the exchange between the executive and me with dumbfounded expressions. What? Owns a condo? He finally broke his silence, and I replied to him with a sigh. Yes. I currently own several properties. And I'm here today to discuss some contracts. Huh? Real estate? You? As he struggled to grasp the situation, I enlightened him. The father you ridiculed had made millions in stocks and owned several properties. I inherited all of that. What? You kept the inheritance a secret from me. You were the one who ridiculed and abandoned my father and me, right? Steve stammered and his face changed colors rapidly. Eventually, he began to beg. Mandy. I'm sorry about that time. I'll break up with her, so please marry me again. Huh? Wait a minute, Steve. Kelly looked at him with a shocked expression. As I looked down at him expressionlessly, Steve pleaded. Actually, my company is going under, and I'm in trouble with money. What? I didn't know about that. Shut up. You be quiet. Mandy, please, we were once married, right? Just as Steve was reaching out towards me, a stern voice rang out. Please do not touch my wife. What is this about? Who are you? There stood Ben, my current husband, who had arrived a bit late. He put his arm around my shoulder and glared at Steve. Tall and dressed in a well-tailored suit, Ben exuded an aura of wealth. Steve shrank back and muttered. Wife. Mandy, you remarried? Yes, I've been remarried for a while. To a man with better financial stability and character than you. No way, how can that be? Steve looked momentarily devastated, but then he started to say something outrageous. Then, Mandy, lend me some money. No, give me some. Just $10,000 would be fine, you're rich, right? To him, I shouted back. After the way you treated me, who would give you money? Don't ever show me that pathetic face again. Get out of here with that woman right now. Startled by my shouting, Steve realized he couldn't get any money from me. He then reached out to Kelly and spoke softly. "Kelly, shall we go? Don't touch me." Kelly lashed out at the crestfallen Steve. "I can't believe you kept quiet about your company going under. You were just after my father's money, weren't you?" "No, it's not like that. Believe me, I love you, Kelly. You just said you'd divorce me. Stop making a fool of me." "Fine, I'll divorce you myself. Be prepared for that. I'll contact you through a lawyer." Kelly stormed off immediately after dropping those words. Apparently, she was from a well-off family. Left behind, Steve stood in stunned silence. At that moment, I couldn't resist whispering in his ear. "Unemployed, poor, single man, serves you right." As Steve crumbled to his knees, Ben and I left the scene. I heard through the grapevine that Steve and Kelly did indeed divorce. Kelly's family owned a construction company, and her enraged parents threw Steve out penniless, who had been almost like a son-in-law. Later, Steve somehow managed to move into a rundown apartment. And now he spends his days laboring, alone and tirelessly. I will never forgive him. Even now, I don't feel the slightest bit of sympathy for him. Meanwhile, Ben and I continue to live a peaceful life. My father, who saved me from a desperate situation, and Ben, who taught me what true happiness is. I am forever grateful to them. Recently, I found out I'm pregnant. Ben is looking forward to the arrival of our child. I want to continue walking this happy path with my new family.